Cue.
Good evening, you're live with Faye on YouTube. Thank you for joining in. Like I tell you, every evening at 8 o'clock, we bring in a discussion about a topic we believe is important from the point of view of what's happening in the country. Yesterday, we discussed the floods in Assam as the floods continue in Assam. To give you a quick update of where what the status of the floods are, as of now, 34 lakh people have been affected. 26 out of 33 districts in Assam are affected by floods. 76 people have died as per the last count by the state government. The Brahmaputra and 8 other rivers in the state are flowing above the danger level. The Kaziranga National Park is also 80% flooded or inundated, and the animals are at risk. Remember, the Kaziranga National Park is where the endangered rhino in India lives. Based on that, we obviously have to continue keeping an eye on Assam. And like I told you, Gunj is doing work in Assam right now. But today's discussion is not about Assam. It's about another topic that I believe is important. Now, as we move on, and unfortunately, the Indian news cycle moves in certain patterns. There is a hot story in every day. And based on those hot stories, people's attention keeps getting diverted. So we talked about Ladakh, we talked about, now there's the Rajasthan government and Sachin pilot, and everybody's talking about that. For a bit, everybody was talking about whether or not Amitabh Bachchan is going to be okay, and we hope that he gets well soon. But we mustn't forget the COVID nightmare, the battle that the country fought and continues to fight against COVID, the migrant laborers and the pain that they went through during the lockdown. And as a result, the thing that I believe we should continue to keep our eye on is the PM Cares Fund, the usage of the fund, the allocation of the fund, and the impact it creates in helping India fight through this, this COVID, problem that we are facing. Let me give you an update of some of the news that's come out about the PM Cares Fund. Now, July 11th on NDTV, and we put up on your screen, came this story saying BJP members of parliament have blocked a parliamentary review of the fund. The Public Accounts Committee is a parliamentary committee as a panel that scrutinizes important work done by the government. Now, this is a panel that is made up of people from different political parties, not just the ruling party. And the chairperson of that committee, Mr. Adhiranjan Chowdhury, had asked that the PM Cares Fund be subject to scrutiny by this panel. But we understand from this story by NDTV that the members of the ruling party, the BJP, made it clear that they don't believe that this fund should be in consideration of that panel. Now, other than this, there are petitions in the court right now seeking transfer of the PM Cares contribution to the NDRF fund, or the National Disaster Response Fund. And while this was being heard in court, we had the central government that defended the fund before the Supreme Court and said that just because there is an NDRF fund doesn't mean that another fund cannot be started. This latest story that has come out after Google's press conference says Google Pay had actually processed about 124 crore rupees worth of donations and contributions to the PM Cares Fund. And of course, the one big question that hasn't been answered, which is the PM Cares Fund public or private? And as a result, does it come under the RTI or not? Now, to this, we have not received a completely coherent answer from the government yet. And these are all the questions that we're going to be tackling in this conversation. The questions that I will ask over the next 1 hour, and I believe we should get answers to. Question number 1. Should citizens of India know who donated money to the PM Cares Fund and in what quantum? First of all, we don't know how much money is in that fund, who has donated it, and in what quantum. So who's given 10 rupees and who's given 10 crore rupees or even more than that? Are these people Indian? Are they from overseas? What capacity are they, and how much have they donated? And we'll celebrate them, obviously, people who've been generous and donated. Second point, should the use of the funds from the PM Cares Fund be made public? So an audit of where the money is going and what it is being allocated to and who's receiving tenders. So for example, if the government has chosen, or if the fund has chosen, for whatever reason, to order 10,000 ventilators from one particular company, should we understand why that company was chosen? Number 3, should the projects funded by the PM Cares Fund be audited for impact? So for example, if there has been an allocation saying that this is how much money is going to be spent on migrant laborers, should we understand how that money was spent, what was exactly done, and how many migrant laborers really benefited from that spend. That is when you study the impact of a particular activity. These are the three questions that I'm asking. Here is my panel for this evening. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi is an RTI activist and was a former information commissioner. I have great respect for Mr. Gandhi's opinion. He's always been completely non-partisan, and he's been equally, questioning of every government, state or center. Mr. Rajiv Mishra is also an RTI activist. We'll have Neerja Chowdhury, very senior journalist, join us through the course of this conversation. Saket Gokhale is an activist who had, in fact, sought a copy of the trust deed and the trustees of the fund through RTI. And he has very interesting points of view. And of course, Mr. Gopal Agarwal representing the BJP. Mr. Agarwal, good evening and thank you for joining us. If I may start with Mr. Shailesh Gandhi. Mr. Gandhi, we had this conversation about a month or so ago when we asked whether or not the PM Cares Fund information should be made public. We haven't really got a clear answer from the government. Do you believe at this point, and a lot of people have forgotten about the fund, I haven't. Do you believe at this point we deserve the information of what's going on in this fund?
First and foremost, there is a question of law. Does the PM Care Fund being defined as a public authority as defined by the RTI Act? And I think there is no doubt that it is a public authority as far as the law is concerned. It has been made, it has been announced and notified by a government notification. It has the Prime Minister and 3 other ministers as trustees ex officio. Therefore, they are trustees by virtue of their being in that office. And if somebody tells me the Prime Minister of India or the Home Minister or the Foreign Minister or the Finance Minister are not government, then who is government? They represent the government. Even if they have a different view from the government, as far as the PM Care Fund is concerned, they must represent the government view. They cannot represent any other view. Therefore, legally, they are a public authority subject to right to information. What they have done is, they are just saying, we will not give. Unfortunately, arrogance brings this kind of attitude in people. You can't ask me. And I cannot see the reason why they are being so opaque. Because even if there is a large amount of money, this makes the government look bad. I think at least politics, there are lots of things which are not open to citizen scrutiny, but something like a PM Cares Fund must be open to scrutiny. Having said that, let me also point out that even previous governments were very reluctant to share the Prime Minister's Relief Fund details or CM Relief Fund details in various states. So this is part of the arrogance of power. And I wish the current government would behave differently. The Prime Minister would say, look, people are asking, I am answerable. That's the simple thing that RTI does. Accountability and answerability to the law of the land. And I am still hoping that the PM Care Fund revises its stand and says we will be open to scrutiny and to parliamentary scrutiny, most certainly.
Saket Gokhale, thanks for joining us. Hiren Gokhale says hello to you from my audience. Apparently you'll recognize him. But you've also made some appeals for information from the PM Cares Fund. Could you tell us what sort of responses, what you asked for and what responses you received?
See, initially in March, when the fund was launched, after that, the principal details that I'd asked for were a copy of the trust deed of PM Cares, a copy of the bylaws, because they claim it's registered as a public charitable trust. So I requested a copy of the bylaws. And in addition to the ex officio members from the government, as Mr. Gandhi mentioned, in addition to that, there are supposed to be 3 trustees who come from the outside, who sit on the board of PM Cares. So I'd asked details about who these trustees are and on what basis they were appointed, because these are usually members of the public. And all of them are going to have a say when it comes to voting as to how the funds will be disbursed. The Prime Minister's office responded to me after 2.5 months, saying that it does not, the PM Cares fund is not a public authority under Section 2H of PM Cares fund uses the national emblem in its logo. The fact that they use a .gov.in login address, for their website So considering all these things, it's a fact that this is also, there's a Ministry of Corporate Affairs notification that came on 23rd of March, exempting, making PM Cares CSR eligible. Now, there might not have been a Gazette notification notifying this fund, but the fact that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in an office order has referred to it as a fund set up by the central government, it fulfills the criteria required under Section 2H of the RTI Act. The sad part is my appeal was rejected without even going into the merits of the argument. So when the first appeal officer responded, they did not give any rebuttal to my arguments, no explanation. They just said that, no, we are satisfied with the PIO's response that this is not a public authority. This is stonewalling. There's nothing else you can call it but pure straight up stonewalling.
In fact, based on, Saket's answer, let me just put on the screen right now the website of the PM Cares Fund. So you can just, as audience members, take a look at what he's talking about. You'll see that it comes up. There is a flag of India. There is the emblem. It is a .gov.in website. There is a picture of the Prime Minister. I understand that you need special permission to use any of these things, the emblem and the picture of the Prime Minister. And while it gives you updates, it says domestic donations, foreign donations, and we'd like to know details of that. Mr. Gopal Agarwal is with us. Mr. Agarwal, before I bring in arguments from my other guests, could you just explain to us this one thing? Is the PM Cares Fund a public entity or a private entity? Mr. Agarwal?
Yeah. Now my voice is coming?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So if we want to understand the thing, we have to understand the law of the land, and there may be difference of opinion, but I tell you that it's a public charitable trust registered in a Trust Act. And there are thousands and thousands of trusts registered across India, and they govern. There is a proper structure of governing how they get ATG, how they are retaining the charitable status, who will audit their account, where they can use their fund. All these rules are guided by the Trust Act that we have. And Income Tax Act and other thing, Auditing Act, Institute of Chartered Accountant, they have all this accounting standard through which that move. So we have to first accept this, that PM Cares Fund is a public charitable trust, and it will be governed by the rules of the Trust Act and income tax rules regarding all these issues, how the charitable trusts are governed. And the third is accounting standard by the Institute of Chartered Accountant. Under these three laws, the PM Cares Fund in the constitutional setup will act within the legal framework. So all these three things are being met. There may be difference of opinion that CAG should audit it or not. It is, but my opinion is CAG is not going to audit thousands and thousands. CAG has a particular, because I am a chartered accountant also, CAG has a particular function where it audits wherever the government funds are transferred, whichever organization, even the public sector undertakings, etc., where the capital is infused by the central government, where taxpayers' money from the government channel come to this. It is not auditing all the charitable trusts or societies or any other Section 8 companies, etc. So this, by legal status, PM Cares cannot come under the CAG. Second thing is, you are talking about the standing committee. Same is the case with the Parliamentary Standing Committee. Just because Adhir Ranjan Chowdhury ji is a chairman of that Public Accounts Committee, he cannot just say that any trust or anything can come under the Parliamentary Standing Committee. There are rules through which what will come under Parliament Standing Committee. That is also very well defined. Parliamentary Standing Committee has a certain functions which are defined in the Parliament Act and other constitutional act. It cannot be the wish of Mr. Adhir Ranjan Chowdhury that I want to bring this trust under this act. He may have his opinion, but and then your question that only BJP opposed is not there. Even BJD has also opposed, and there are ample examples that even Prime Minister Relief Fund since 1948 is operating under trust. So trust is a very well established mechanism through which charitable activities are done in India. It is well governed act. There are thousands and thousands of charitable organization trusts. And with regard to other information, it is in the public domain. He has asked which are the 3 other trustees. So at present, there are no other than the 4 ministers. There is no other trustees. Its account will be audited and it will be scrutinized, ATG and other things. If they have got, it is
Mr. Gopal Agarwal, the thousands and thousands of other public charitable trusts you're referring to, none of them have 100% deduction to donations made. Only the PM Cares Fund has that 100% deduction. So there is an exception that is being made here, point number 1. Point number 2, the fact that this actually has a better deduction right now than state chief ministers' relief funds is an exception that is being made. Foreign money that can come in directly into this fund is a third exception that is being made, which other charities do not have that availability. They have a far more complicated route, yes. And finally, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Home Minister, and the Defense Minister, who are the trustees right now on the board of this fund, are all ex officio taking part in this trust, right? You don't have anybody outside of government on this trust right now. They are using their position of power in government to qualify them to run this trust. Doesn't that then make this trust of interest to the citizens of this country? Mr. Agarwal.
No, the thing is, there are 2 questions to your debate. One thing is it legal? Is this trust operating under the legal structure and provided under the laws of the land? So for that, I am very much clear that there is no violation of legal laws, etc. It is quite there, which is the prevalent law. It is working under that. Now, if you are saying that foreign contribution cannot come to any private trust, it is not the case. Private donations can come. Bill Gates Foundation, there are several examples, even RGF, this Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, and even this National Prime Minister's Relief Fund. There are funds which are getting donation from foreign countries. There is a procedure let down under the Foreign Contribution Act through which you can get the permission. You have to transparently put your account, and that is there. The third thing is objective of this fund. The fund objective is immediate relief to this corona crisis. How their funds are being used, definitely everybody has a right to know. There will be an independent auditor. You cannot say that Institute of Chartered Accountant is not a eligible organization whose audits are useless, whose audits are not authentic. It is a legal process which has been established since 1949. Our Institute of Chartered Accountant has very well laid down audit procedures. It is very well disciplined organization, and it has all the right. It is auditing even PSUs, public sector undertaking, bank, etc., are being audited by the independent auditors. And professionals like chartered accountants. If you say that professionals or these institutions are of no use, even the court, what will tell about what is there in Chief Information Commission office only, that they can only have the right to this. Transparency.
Right, okay. I understood your point, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. Before I quickly bring in the rest of my panelists for rebuttals, quick question: can you tell us how much money has been collected by the PM Cares Fund so far?
That I don't have the figures. I have not gone into the account, etc.
Who knows?
But that will be the finally. I don't know though. There will be structure. I am not privy to that information, or neither I have gone into that. But I know that lot of funds have gone for from the PM Cares for various for fighting corona crisis. It was particularly assembled, or a structure was established to fight corona crisis, and those funds have been utilized.
Okay.
Thousands of ventilators have been imported, and this is a crisis which is a very big magnitude. You need certain funds to work on that, and it's a private contribution. No government money has gone into
what
this.
No, what?
All right.
With
Rebuttals,
government
I'm
money has
opening this
gone.
up. So Mr. Gopal Agarwal's argument is good faith. Have faith, hang on. Fundamentally, that's his argument. We've not broken any laws. Opening this up for rebuttals.
And it is
Go
no,
first,
Faye,
and
one
then I'll
more
bring
thing. My argument is there. It is a legal structure
it's
which
within
is
the legal structure.
within the legal framework of the country. You cannot
Okay,
just do away with all the legal structures and say that these are useless and we'll establish only what I think correct is the right legal
okay, all right, fair enough. Saket, go ahead.
Okay, so rebuttals to Mr. Agarwal's comments right now. First of all, he said that PM Cares is a public charitable trust under the Trust Act. Mr. Agarwal doesn't know that the Trust Act only applies to private trusts, not to public charitable trusts. If the Trust Act is to apply to this trust, there's a clause in the Trust Act which says that the beneficiaries can access the trust deed and the accounts at any moment they want. And the chairperson and the trustee have to review those. Technically, people of India are the beneficiaries of this fund. So if you're claiming that this fund has been established under the Trust Act, then any beneficiary, even forget the RTI Act, any beneficiary has the right to examine the accounts under the Trust Act. So for your information, it's not a trust that comes under the Trust Act.
No, I don't think you can just have access
I can
to
read
all.
the act to you right now.
No, let him finish.
I can read the act to you right now. So I've sent a legal notice to the PMO regarding this. So if it's a private trust, only then it comes under the Trust Act. If it's a public charitable trust, it is not governed by the Trust Act. Number one. Number two, you're saying no government money has come in.
No, I would like you to read that because I am working in so many trusts.
Put up a copy right now and put it on the screen if you want, sir, with the exact section of the article. If you're talking about the Indian Trust Act, but wait, let's hang on for that. Second thing, you're saying there's no government money that's come in. Okay, can I tell you the number of PSUs whose money has gone into the PM Cares Fund? The number of public sector units, including ONGC, Indian Oil, listed entities and including ministries such as Indian Railways Corporation. It has Steel
So
India.
they donate to so many companies, so many trusts, etc. All are not.
This is not Republic TV. Let me finish. So the money that has come in from a number of PSUs, these are funds that have come in directly from the PSUs. There was even a controversy at AIMS where money was being deducted from doctor's salary. And then the government said that, no, this is an opt-out model. If you don't want your salary to be deducted, you have to opt out. Ideally, a voluntary donation should be an opt-in model, not an opt-out model. Number two. Number three, you're saying it's been legally set up. And you're saying it's been set up under the aegis of all the laws of the land and auditing. Have you told people that the independent auditors for the last 60 years were Thakur Vaidyanath Iyer and company? And then the Modi government suddenly last year changed the PMNRF accountants. On 23rd April, without a bidding process, they appointed Sark and Associates as the independent auditors for PM Cares Fund. Can I show you pictures of Mr. Gupta, who heads Sark and Associates, with a notable number of BJP leaders? Can I show you his videos of going on TV?
No, you are that way. You can cut. No. This
is a great scheme. Can I show you pictures of him attending the World Hindu Congress where RSS?
So I am on several trusts. You will say that. No. You will.
When you speak together, nobody can understand you. But very valid points made by Saket Gokhale, and we'll put those photographs up as well. Neerja Chowdhury joins us right now. Ms. Chowdhury, you and I have had 3 conversations about the PM Cares Fund. You were very categorical in the fact that you believe it is good for the image of the government right now to come clean about this fund because everybody put money in this fund. Everybody invested their goodwill in this fund. We want to know where the money has gone. What is your opinion now, so many months later? Do you believe the government needs to now on priority come clean about this fund?
Yes, I think, when the Prime Minister, when there's a pandemic of the kind we have, when the Prime Minister of India makes an appeal that he's going to set up a special fund, which is done, obviously a lot of people gave money. Now going into the legalities of the whole thing, the whole thing is got caught up in whether the CAG should be scrutinizing it. Parliament should be scrutinizing it. Parliament is the ultimate body that holds a government to account. The citizens of India, very ordinary people want to know how much money has been collected, number one, who has given the money and how the money is being spent. Isn't it legitimate for any citizen of the country to know this and to have this basic information? It's my right as a citizen to demand this. I'm not, you cannot fudge it in all the legalities of trust laws and so on. I don't doubt that a legal framework is governing this trust. I don't doubt that at all. But this basic information, and Parliament and committees of Parliament who represent the citizens, after all, political parties are representing all of us in one way or another, if they want to say and raise these questions of how the government has responded to the pandemic, and under that discussion to be featured, how the PM Care Fund is functioning, I think it's a very legitimate demand for any opposition party person to go into. Now, it's another matter that PSC, there was a stonewalling of these issues when it came up by BJP MPs. Several times stonewalling gets done. But I think the citizens of India have a right to demand answers to these questions.
Very
Can
well
I say
said.
something?
I want to just
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
One second. I just want to read out some of the questions that are coming in from our audience.
No,
okay,
Faye,
Mr.
okay.
Go ahead.
What I want, there are two things which Neerja ji said, that people should know. I agree. People should know the accounts, what is there, how much money has used, where it has been utilized, who is donating. These information should be there. I have no question or no two opinion on that. The question is, should CAG audit or not, or PSC should scrutinize it or not? If you are only talking that people, it should be more, it should be transparent, etc. So that is a different question. That's a different way.
Mr.
Agarwal, you are discussing. No. If you say, if the trust,
if you put up, one second. Let me just rebut this since you insisted on rebutting. If you put up tomorrow one account saying this is the money, how will I know whether to trust that account or not unless the CAGA has audited it, unless the parliamentary committees have looked at it? These are our representatives of the citizens. They have the ability to search through the accounts and actually tell us this is valid. Then we will trust it. Now, that means you are saying only you trust only CAG, yes, not the Trust Act and not the Income Tax Act. Or if you are saying that, we have difference of opinion. Yes, I believe in the Trust Act, and I believe in Institute of Chartered Accountant, and I believe in the Income Tax Act. So I believe that when it comes to my money, taxpayer money, when it comes to money of ours that has gone to government, that the CAG must look at it and it must be subject to parliamentary scrutiny. That's the basis of the democracy. Reading out questions of our audience, Pavan Kumar has said include Twitter accounts of all of the guests. We also have Vikas Sharma. How will this set a precedent of Indian democracy and accountability of funds received in the future? Very interesting question. Saif Hussain says, if the PM Cares Fund is not categorized as classified, why is the government hiding the details? Taha Kapsi says, good job. We also have Tanvi Desai, who says, Saket, Gokhale, good job. And people telling us to continue working hard. Mr. Rajiv Mishra is here, after which I will go to Shailesh Gandhi. Mr. Mishra, आप बताइए कि आपको लगता है कि PM Cares Fund कम से कम RTI के अंदर आनी चाहिए?
देखो फे, सबसे पहले तो मैं आपको ये बता दूं कि पीएम केयर फंड का जो पहला वर्ड है वो नाम है पीएम. पीएम मीन्स होता है प्राइम मिनिस्टर. प्राइम मिनिस्टर जो है वो गवर्नमेंट बॉडी का सबसे उच्च अंक पे है, और जब भारत सरकार के सबसे उच्च पद पर बैठे, पदों का, नाम का नहीं, पद का अगर वहां जिक्र है तो ये पूरी तरीके से सरकारी फंड है. इसको कहीं से भी आप ये नहीं कह सकती कि ये प्राइवेट फंड है. और जब ये सरकारी फंड है तो इस सरकारी फंड की अकाउंटेबिलिटी मेंटेन करना ये सीएजी के अंतर्गत में आता है. दूसरी बात मैं आपको बता दूं कि पीएम केयर फंड, अगर ये मान के चलते हैं कि ये प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी और 4 और मिनिस्टर जिनके नाम है उनके द्वारा क्रिएट किया गया फंड है, तो आप मेरे को बताओ कि कैसे इतनी जल्दी 4 दिन में किसी ट्रस्ट को आप ये फैसिलिटी दे देते हैं कि उसके अंतर्गत सीएसआर फंड की छूट आप दे देते हैं, उसको आप आईटीआर से छूट दे देते हैं, इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न से छूट दे देते हैं. हाउ इट कैन बी पॉसिबल? ट्रस्ट रजिस्ट्रेशन एक्ट जिसका अग्रवाल साहब जिक्र कर रहे थे, ट्रस्ट रजिस्ट्रेशन एक्ट आप जाकर के पढ़ लो अग्रवाल साहब. मिनिमम 3 इयर्स जब तक आपका ट्रस्ट कार्यरत नहीं है,
नहीं,
ये सब फैसिलिटी उसमें नहीं मिलती है.
गलत है आजकल.
अरे एटीजी के 50 में आप काट लेना. देखो अग्रवाल साहब, मैंने आपके बीच में कुछ नहीं काटा. आपको मेरे बातों को काटने का पूरा समय है. दूसरी बात मैं आपको बताता हूं कि पीएम केयर्स फंड में आपने जितना भी फंड लाया है, इस फंड में बहुत सारे गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के फंड है। दूसरी चीज, आपने एक स्पेशल जीआर निकाला गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का, जिसमें आपने कहा कि सीएम केयर फंड में अगर कोई पैसा डालता है सीएम रिलीफ फंड में, तो भी आपने सीएसआर में बंदी हटाया, सीएसआर में उनको छूट नहीं मिलेगी, सिर्फ पीएम केयर फंड में ही डालने पर उनको सीएसआर में छूट मिलेगी। ये सारी चीजें जो आपने की है, सीएसआर मतलब क्या? सीएसआर मतलब कंप्लीटली गवर्नमेंट फंड, ये कोई प्राइवेट फंड नहीं है। सीएसआर है कंपनी सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी फंड, जो कंपनी के ऊपर भारत सरकार के द्वारा लगाई जाती है कि भैया आपने अगर भारत सरकार से, भारत में रह करके इतना पैसा कमाया।
ये तो सब गलत है।
Let me just clarify this. एक मिनट, let me just clarify this. CSR activity.
CSR कोई गवर्नमेंट का फंड नहीं है।
Yes, yes.
नहीं, कंपनी का फंड है,
गवर्नमेंट।
फे जी, 2-3 बातें इन्होंने बिल्कुल गलत कही हैं, गलत फैक्ट
मैं क्लैरिफाई कर रही हूँ मिस्टर अग्रवाल, मैं क्लैरिफाई कर रही हूँ। CSR is corporate social responsibility, where every corporate is necessarily needed. They need to spend a certain portion of their profits on social work, and this can go to any NGO. It can go to any project as long as it is not for profit, as long as it is social work. While clarifying that point, it doesn't in any way negate the rest of the points that Mr. Rajiv Mishra has made.
One more point.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Agarwal.
This 3 years restriction for any trust is not the case. Legally, the day any trust is being registered, they can apply.
No, Agarwal.
I know, no. Sir, I know. Second thing, okay,
all right. Gentlemen, I just want to bring in Mr. Shailesh.
No, 10 more seconds. The thing is, this PM Care Fund was established to fight the corona crisis. It needed immediate money, and the contribution are voluntary. It is not, the government has not transferred any fund to this PM Care. It is voluntary contribution from people. Those who don't, wait. Those who don't have faith, जिसको faith नहीं है, इसमें मत donate करो ना आप। आपको किसने कहा जबरदस्ती उस PM Cares में दीजिए?
अग्रवाल
साहब, आपने रिक्वेस्ट किया है पीएम होकर के आपने रिक्वेस्ट किया है कि हमारे
फंड में डालो। जबरदस्ती नहीं किया।
फैसिलिटी मैं आपको दे रहा हूँ।
सीएजी का ऑडिट वहीं पे होता है जहाँ पे सरकार के पैसे जाते हैं, उसमें सीएजी आती है। इसमें सरकार ने कोई पैसे नहीं दिए, पब्लिक कंट्रीब्यूशन।
All right. Is this, Mr. Agarwal, is this a government fund or is this a private fund? Is it public sector or is it private sector?
It's a fund established by Prime Minister and they are the trustees. It is for fighting the corona crisis, and the contribution are voluntary. It is under the Trust Act.
I'm not asking if the contribution is voluntary. Mr. Agarwal, has the Prime Minister established this fund in his professional capacity or is this in his personal capacity? Is this the Narendra Modi fund or is this the Prime Minister's fund?
Perfectly.
It is a trust. It is established under a trust, and we have the National Relief Fund in the same case. National Relief Fund.
Answering my question.
Prime Minister. No, it is in the form of Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. It is the same structure.
It is for the National Relief Fund. Okay, all right. Fair enough. Mr. Shailesh,
and since this Prime Minister's National Relief Fund is established since 1948. So it is working in India in the same format. Why did you
start a new fund? Why start a new fund? Why not use
this is for fighting? This is for fighting this corona crisis specifically.
So what have you done in the corona crisis specifically? Where is the money?
The Prime Minister has come out with certain information that almost 50,000 ventilators have been ordered. Around 15,000 has already come. No, if you don't want to believe, if you don't,
Mr. Agarwal,
if you don't want to believe the Prime Minister, if you don't want to believe the Prime Minister, and if you want to believe Mr. Gokhale and other things, that's all right.
Everybody stop. Mr. Agarwal, in your answer to your question, unfortunately, I'm a journalist. As journalists, we are trained not to believe anyone until we see paper, until we see proof. That's just the wiring. I'm sorry, that's how we are built. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, the thing that our audience must realize is that the National Relief Fund, so the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, or the PMNRF was also not audited by CAG, but was audited by a private sector company, which has just been changed, and SARC associates have been appointed for the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund as well. And I know that you've battled a great deal with previous governments also about this one point. My question to you is this. Do you believe there was a need to start a new fund when the PM National Relief Fund already existed? Do you believe both the National Relief Fund and the PM Cares Fund should be subject to RTI and CAG audit?
As far as the PM Relief Fund was concerned, the Chief Information Commissioner had in 2007, in my application, ruled that the PM Relief Fund is a public authority and is subject to RTI. And I got responses from the PM Relief Fund under RTI. So that's not in doubt. Mr. Agarwal is at great pains to show that the PM Cares Fund is not an illegal entity. Nobody has said that. I think neither you nor any of the panelists have said that it's an illegal fund. It's a legal entity. Completely agree. But the question that I think Mr. Agarwal needs to answer is the PM a private individual or a public figure? Whenever the PM works, he is working as the Prime Minister of India. Whenever a judge works, he works as a judge on the Supreme Court or the High Court or whichever it is. No public servant, and I repeat, no public servant can say, no, I'm a private individual. And when he represents himself as Prime Minister of India, he is a public figure. The fund is a public figure. Otherwise, we'll have to keep asking, ये आपका private है कि public है? This is absurd. This is completely absurd. I'm sorry, Mr. Agarwal, but this is completely absurd. You cannot claim that the Prime Minister of India and the other ministers. You are asking whether we have faith in the Prime Minister. Yes, I have faith in the Prime Minister of India, whoever it is. To Faye, your question as to why didn't they create a new one, it's a possibility. I'm not saying I have any knowledge. It's a possibility that they don't want anything to do with Mr. Nehru. So since Nehru started the PM Relief Fund, maybe they decided they don't want it. Fair enough. I mean, I feel this is unnecessary, but even then, even conceding that it can be a personal ego and the urge to say, I did it, fair enough. I mean, that is something which public servants may feel and political people may feel. I would not dispute that very much, but it needs to be public. Public has a right to know. Mr. Agarwal, it is not a question of your or the PM's ego to decide what I should know. As citizen of India, I have rights. It's my fundamental right to know. And this you cannot deny me. And this is given to me under the Right to Information Act. And please explain how you can say that this is not controlled by government. Is the Prime Minister not part of the government, and does he not represent the government? Further, I'm going further. He does not represent the individual Narendra Modi, he represents the Prime Minister of India. The Finance Minister, the Defense Minister, all of them are representatives of this nation. They are not private individuals. And why are you standing on ego like this with so much arrogance? At least for the sake of optics, as Neerja said, please share the details. This is not good for India.
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Agarwal has left the conversation. He apparently had another conversation that he wanted to be part of. Having said that, let me take this back to Neerja Chowdhury. Ms. Chowdhury, I personally, as a journalist, am unwilling to accept this. Do you not have faith in the government? Do you not have faith in the Prime Minister as an answer to any of the questions that have been asked so far? What is your response to Mr. Agarwal's answers that he's given us on this panel at least? Ms. Chowdhury?
Oh, it's to me. Sorry, I missed the beginning part with the sound. No, my very simple thing that comes to my mind is this. To ask questions is not an expression of lack of confidence in the Prime Minister or any minister. That's a job. You know, if I don't, as a citizen, ask questions, then I'm not being a citizen. I'm just burying my head in the sand somewhere. If you as a media person don't ask questions, you're not doing your role, performing your role as a media person. If a member of parliament, whichever party that member of parliament belongs to, does not ask questions of the government in parliament, they're not worth the salt. They are not there. They are there for a certain purpose. So I think to conclude that the moment you ask a question, you are either the ultimate extreme that the ruling party people take this debate to is, if you ask a question, you're anti-national.
Yes.
That's the kind of climate we have come to. Number 2 point, I will say, which has been raised by state governments, I want to make this point. They are starved of funds to deal with the pandemic, with the health crisis that we are now facing. They've been crying out for more money. If a PM Care fund can be formed, why should a CM Care not be allowed to be formed as far as eligibility of CSR funds is concerned? Number 3, the point, many companies have made this point that we were told to donate to the PM Care fund. As we've donated the maximum we could, we have now nothing left to give. Is there truth in this? That is not, voluntary donation. The Prime Minister's office, the government have gone company after company and asked them to donate to PM Care Fund. And therefore, it is even more important. It's in the PM's interest. It is in the government's interest to come out with information, till the CAG, RTI issue gets resolved, whether it should be covered. They should periodically come out with information to the country. How much money? If there were 7,000 crores, that's the last figure I remember. Where else has it gone apart from the 50,000 ventilators? We want to know, where is this money being used?
Yes.
So periodical information must be given to the country. Who's donated? This question has been raised. Are Chinese companies donating to PM Care Fund? This has been raised. We don't have an answer to that.
Yes. Absolutely. And, we've seen in the past also, and we've had these arguments when it came to the election bonds about where the money was coming from, and why it's important as citizens that we find out where the money is coming from, because we need to know who's putting money, what is being used for, to understand the give and take of favors that will result in this sort of money exchanging hands. So simply put, as citizens in a democracy, we have to have access to this information.
Sorry, it's really funny you mentioned electoral bonds, because there's one fact which a lot of people don't know, is that if an electoral bond is bought by a donor, and if the political party does not redeem it within 15 days, that money goes to Prime Minister's National Relief Fund automatically. That's the level of transparency we have in these funds right now.
Very well said. And, the argument also about where the Chinese money is coming from and why this is a problem. I just want to point out one more thing. And I see Rajiv, Mishra, I see your hand go up. We've had, and I've had several conversations about diesel prices and petrol prices. I want to remind our audience, just yesterday, Anshu Gupta of Gunj was on the channel. He talked about how it's difficult and expensive to actually move supplies from other parts of the country to Assam, which is flooded right now because of diesel prices. Any sort of relief work is getting crushed by diesel prices. And the government's argument for diesel prices is we need money to fight COVID. So if you're taking money from our taxes and from the government budgets as it is, why do you also need the PM Cares Fund? And where is the money of the PM Cares Fund going? And these are all questions we deserve answers to. Rajiv, Mishra, go ahead.
फी सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि भले अग्रवाल साहब अभी यहाँ पर नहीं है, लेकिन मैं आपको बता दूं फे कि आप इतना समझ के चलो कि जो भी आपने जब पीएम केयर फंड उसका नाम रखा, चाहे वो पीएम रिलीफ फंड हो, पीएम केयर फंड हो या नेशनल डिजास्टर रिलीफ फंड हो, एनडीआरएफ हो, जो भी हो, जैसे ही आपने इसको किया और इसको लेकर के कोई गवर्नमेंट सर्कुलर आपने जारी किया, वैसे ही ये फंड जो है वो गवर्नमेंट फंड हो जाता है। इसमें स्पेशली केंद्र सरकार ने एक सर्कुलर जारी किया कि इवन सीएम रिलीफ फंड को भी आप सीएसआर का छूट नहीं दे रहे हैं। ये गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से सर्कुलर जारी किया गया। ऐसी स्थिति में हाउ अग्रवाल कह सकते हैं कि सीएम रिलीफ फंड से ज्यादा एक प्राइवेट फंड पे सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को विश्वास है और वो कहती है कि यहाँ आप इन्वेस्ट करो तो हम आपको सीएसआर का आपको छूट दे सकते हैं और सीएम रिलीफ फंड में नहीं दे सकते जो गवर्नमेंट बॉडी है। हाउ इट कैन बी पॉसिबल? और दूसरी बात पे आपको मैं बता दूं, नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी फंड होता था तो मैं कोई क्वेरी नहीं करता था, और हालांकि अगर वो पब्लिक चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट के अंतर्गत वो अगर रजिस्टर्ड है तो उनसे भी क्वेश्चन किया जा सकता है। हाई कोर्ट के मेरे पास 2-2, 3-3 जजमेंट है जिसमें ये बहुत क्लियर है कि कोई भी पब्लिक चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट के अकाउंटेबिलिटी को लेकर के, अकाउंट्स को लेकर के आप राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन में उसकी जानकारी हासिल कर सकते हैं। और मैं आपको बता दूं फे, ये जो साकेत जी हैं, ये कल गए इंफॉर्मेशन कमिश्नर के यहाँ जाएंगे। अगर वहां हार भी गए तो मैं साकेत जी से ये रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि वो अगला पड़ाव कोर्ट तक जाएं, उनको 100% उनको विजय मिलेगी और वो निश्चित तौर पे राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन में सारी जानकारी एकत्र कर पाएंगे।
सर मैंने एक्चुअली इसमें बिकॉज पीएम जवाब नहीं देते हैं तो हमने दिल्ली के सब 33 सब रजिस्ट्रार जो हैं उनके साथ कॉपी फाइल किया कि हमें ट्रस्ट डीड की कॉपी दे दीजिए, तो वो तो मिल जाएगी। पीएमओ रोकाएगा लेकिन सब रजिस्ट्रार से कॉपी मिल जाएगी। वन मोर थिंग आई नीड टू से Faye here, which is like you said right now about the taxes that we pay and the money coming from PM cares. There's something very odd, which is on 31st of March, the government of India, and I'm not talking about PM cares, the government of India had placed an order for 40,000 ventilators, out of which
Yes.
30,000 belong to BL Scanray and 10,000 belong to Agwa. Now in May, PM Care says it's spending 3,000 crores and ordering 50,000 ventilators. The funny thing is they also include 30,000 Scanray ventilators and 10,000 Agwa. So what we are not clear on is whether the government in total has ordered 90,000 ventilators or whether these 40,000 ordered by the government of India with taxpayers' money is now being combined and with 10,000 added and being passed off as a PM Cares order.
Also, Saket, just take a look at the story that I put up. This is the Huffington Post had done a series of stories on this a week ago, which is that the ventilators that is being made by Agwa apparently have problems with it. They've 2 or 3 different people have highlighted the quality of these ventilators for which the money has come from the PM Cares Fund. And this is the difference. And Saket, if you want to respond to this, when government spends money on any project, there is an audit on how you chose the vendor of that project and what sort of tender process you used and what was the quality of the material that was purchased and what was the impact of the work that was done. Right. Obviously, none of this will happen in this particular fund.
No, absolutely not. In fact, the funny part is that tenders for these ventilators were originally released by Hindustan Life Care, which is a government of India PSU. And they were the ones who placed the order for the 40,000 ventilators. This went through, I think the tender was amended about 14 times to the point where the Ken even did a story about how the tender is being reverse engineered to meet the criteria of whoever their favorite supplier is. Subsequently, since May, there has not been a single tender that has been issued. So which is why the question, again, it begs the question, is PM Cares ordering 50,000 ventilators separately, or is PM Cares trying to pass off 40,000 government of India ventilators as their own? Because the only tenders that have come out have been from HLI Life Care. They have not come out from PM Cares Fund at all until now. So there has been no competitive bidding. We don't know what the specifications were. 3 days ago, Straits Times of Singapore did a story where they said that majority of these ventilators are useless because these are invasive ventilators, what they call BPAP. These are ventilators that require an invasive process, whereas doctors are now realizing that invasive processes are damaging. And in fact, they prefer to use non-invasive ventilators, which are more expensive, but none of these 50,000 ventilators are non-invasive. So now the manufacturer of these ventilators are claiming that PM Care has ordered these, but now they're going to export them to other countries because Indian doctors have said no to these ventilators.
एक इम्पोर्टेंट बात बता रहा हूँ है फे आपको कि आज अगर कोई प्राइवेट गृह निर्माण संस्था है उसको भी अगर रजिस्टर्ड है, गवर्नमेंट के यहाँ रजिस्टर्ड है, तो उसको भी 1 लाख रुपए से ऊपर का टेंडर करने के लिए सार्वजनिक निविदा निकालनी पड़ती है उसको, मतलब उसको पब्लिक टेंडर निकालना पड़ता है। ऐसी स्थिति में पीएम केयर फंड से अगर सैकड़ों करोड़ रुपए के टेंडर हुए हैं या किसी भी तरीके का रिलीफ दिया गया है, तो इसकी जानकारी तो कम से कम चैरिटी कमिश्नर को तो होनी जरूरी है। और चैरिटी कमिश्नर एक ऐसा बॉडी है जिसको कि राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन में हमको वो सारी जानकारी देनी चाहिए। अगर हम उसके यहाँ अप्लाई करते हैं कि पीएम केयर्स फंड के अंतर्गत आपके यहाँ जो खर्च बताया गया वो कैसा कैसा है, तो उनका काम है कि वो हमको दे। ये दिस इज द रूल। अगर इसके बावजूद अगर वो इस तरह की बातें करते हैं, जैसा कि अग्रवाल साहब, मेरे को तो ये समझ में नहीं आता है कि जो कल तक मोदी जी ये कहते थे कि भारतवर्ष की जनता को 1-1 रुपए का हिसाब लेने का अधिकार सरकार से है, ये बात वो 2014 के इलेक्शन के पहले कहते थे। आज पीएम केयर्स फंड को लेकर के इतने ज्यादा चिंतित क्यों हैं कि वो हिसाब देना नहीं चाहते? अरे ये तो उन्होंने ही कहा था कि भारत की जनता को एक एक रुपए का हिसाब लेने का अधिकार है। फिर पीएम केयर्स फंड में ऐसी क्या बात है कि वो हिसाब नहीं दे पा रहे?
You know, I want to take this back to Shailesh Gandhi. Mr. Gandhi, just to read out some of the questions again. Satish Patel says government.in IDs are issued by INC, government entity, only to government bodies, not to private trust. Gaurav Mukherjee says, keep up the good work. Thank you, Gaurav. Safi Mohammed, I want all journalists to also hear the comment you've made on journalism. I believe this is to Neerja Chowdhury. Geeta Kumar also telling us to keep up the good work. Blackbird, my first super chat. All right, nice to have you guys with us. Mr. Gandhi, the fact that this entire system has left room for us to ask the questions we're asking today, going back to what Ms. Chowdhury said, that just from the point of good faith and transparency, this entire structure seems riddled in cloak and dagger. It seems almost wantonly non-transparent. Do you think that this is not something we should be having in the middle of a pandemic, given the fact that the New York Times has written about it, the Straits Times has written about it, the Associated Press has written about it now? This is a very worrying place for the country to be.
In particular, it is a question of the credibility of my Prime Minister, irrespective of the person occupying that position. It's a question of the credibility of my government and my Prime Minister, which is looking very bad. Therefore, I would still plead with them and say, for God's sake, don't. I'm aware of what they are planning to do. I mean, I can guess what they are guessing. Legally, they are a public authority and have to fall in RTI. But when Mr. Saket goes to the Central Information Commission, he'll be in a queue for 2 years.
Perfect.
Even if the commission gives him a favorable order, he'll go to the High Court, and that will put him off by another 10 years. So this is a very standard thing based on which they are believing that for the next 10, 12 years, they need not be accountable, which is very sad. But that's why I'm saying, instead of only talk of legalities, I mean, legally, yes, talk of the legality. But instead of depending on the inordinate delays in our entire system, for God's sake, for the sake of the Prime Minister's office, and as I said, he's my Prime Minister, whether I like him or not, whether I like the individual concerned is not the issue. This is India's Prime Minister. This is India's PM Care Funds, and they must be accountable, and they must show that they are accountable. One small thing I would like to point out about the rationale of why a fund of this nature was ever devised. The PM NRF fund also was devised for the same reason. They said in a crisis, we cannot go through the normal governmental procedures, and therefore we need discretion. And that was the logic of the PM National Relief Fund, which must be the logic of the PM Cares Fund also. That in a crisis, normal governmental procedures, if you have to go through, if you say tender for this, do this, it may be difficult, it may pose difficulties. Fair enough. We'd like to try and trust our CMs, our PMs, and so on. But they must be transparent. That's the best bet they can do. Not every transaction of the PM's Relief Fund or the PM Cares Fund is done by the Prime Minister. So that would be very childish of us to believe that. But this is damaging the credibility of my nation. This is damaging the credibility of my Prime Minister. And for God's sake, don't let that happen.
Well, I just want to point this out. Saket, if you want to respond to this, I was looking at this article that's on your screen right now. The Supreme Court issues notice to the center on a plea to transfer PM Cares money into the NDRF. And the Supreme Court gave the government 4 weeks from this article that I'm looking at to respond. I pulled up my calendar and I realized 4 weeks expires, drum roll, today. Saket,
you know,
do you think we'll have an answer?
You know something funny? The National Disaster Relief Fund, even today, does not have a bank account number yet. And this has been a demand that's been going on for a very long time. But the National Disaster Relief Fund has been so ignored by the current administration that they've not even yet set up a bank account. So the first thing they're going to put in their affidavit that they give to the Supreme Court is, bank account hi nahi hai, to hum kahan pe transfer karenge? It's a very convenient way out. There's no bank account for the NDRF. That's how sorry the situation is right now. The NDMA is being used because the NDMA is an authority, again, where the Prime Minister is the ex-officio chairperson. The NDMA is being used by PM Cares to disburse funds to states. So the NDMA responded to my RTI and they said they've disbursed something around about 1,000 crores to states for migrants' welfare. The problem again comes in with ventilators. The problem is, again, we don't know who's the procuring authority. PM Cares says it's not a public authority. Ministry of Health says we do not know. So on what basis? I mean, who is acquiring ventilators is the question. You know, who's actually the one placing the order, evaluating the bids? We do not know that. We also do not know how much money has come in, because earlier Mr. Agarwal was saying not a single penny of government. That's absolute garbage, because the Indian Railways has donated money. The Ministry of Defense has donated money. There is a lot of public sector organizations where employee salaries were deducted by default. And later when some of them said, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we might lose our jobs, we need our money. That's when they were told you have to opt out from deduction. Otherwise, by default, it's an opt-in. Ideally, it should be the other way around. I mean, if it's a voluntary contribution, I should be going to my employer and saying, deduct money and put it into a PM Cares fund. Here you have to opt out. So basically, if you do not object to it, your money is going to be deducted and sent away. So there is a lot of entities. And there are only one question I have, Faye, which nobody from the BJP or the government has yet been able to give an answer to. PM Cares fund was announced on the 28th of March, if I'm not mistaken, 27th or the 28th, in the evening at 4 p.m. Within the next 12 hours, we started seeing private companies coming in with donations of 100 crores, 200 crores out of their CSR funds. Now, there is a simple question. Any company that donates 100, 200 crores is first going to have a board meeting. They're first going to consult their board of directors, who will have to make an approval for a payment. In a pandemic, when everyone's working from home, that approval is not going to come in 12 hours. I mean, suddenly the PM announces a fund on Twitter and everyone's ready with 100, 200 crores to contribute to it. That's just absolutely bizarre. None of these companies would have had the time to get their board of directors to sit down and approve this contribution of triple-digit crores. So, like ma'am was saying earlier, you know, did companies have an earlier idea of the PM Cares fund? Were they told, were they actually coerced into contributing to this fund? Because I do not believe that a board meeting is going to happen in 12 hours and a board of directors unanimously approved and said, chalo, 200 crore de do PM Cares fund mein. That is not impossible under any corporate governance.
Very well said. Let me take this to Neerja Chowdhury. Ms. Chowdhury, so many questions about the money that has gone in. And I just want to add one more angle. I have spoken to people who run NGOs who would have otherwise been distributing food, looking after migrant laborers, looking after children, looking after education, pregnant women, that sort of thing. They've actually run out of money this year because CSR money that would have otherwise gone to NGO work has actually been diverted by companies to the PM Cares fund instead. So what the fund has done is that it has sucked up all the liquidity that would have otherwise gone to not-for-profit work. And so work that would have happened on the ground has not happened on the ground from these NGOs. One hopes that the PM Cares fund results in that work. As that result, then, do you believe that we have questions here that have not been answered or should be answered as to why so many corporates are putting in this much money? Why were, for example, like Saket pointed out, public sector employees given an opt-out option instead of an opt-in option? Why was the Indian Railways and other ministries transferring money as well?
No, those are very valid questions. And you know, what you started off with, you know, the NGO sector, the NGOs and voluntary work, people who represent voluntary work have done absolutely marvelous job. You know, when the migrants hit the roads, the kind of feeding, the way they rallied around, so many little groups, little or big groups got into the act. And everybody acknowledges, even the Prime Minister himself has acknowledged the work they did. Now, you know, as far as the social sector is concerned, women and children are the most vulnerable today. Lancet did a story not long ago, and you're familiar with this, that in this next 6 months, globally, 1.3 million may die unless they get certain relief. UNICEF put out a figure of 3 lakh children who may die, additionally to what happens every year. Now, if this money is going to be sucked out, then the money that was going to be put, you know, whether it is midday meals, whether it's Anganwadis, we don't know even the situation with that. Have additional funds been made available? I know Maharashtra government, for instance, when the lockdown took place, just before the lockdown, they had allocated additional fund. But that is not the case with all state governments. And the situation is very, very bad, Faye, because with now the monsoon, we are getting into the monsoon, respiratory problems, problems of diarrhea, pneumonia that hits children during this time is going to now have what the situation is going to be like. In Telangana, there was a report that 204 early marriages, child marriages had taken place during the lockdown period. So girls being pulled out of school, children getting into trafficking, early marriages because parents don't have enough money or food to feed. These are things we are going to get into big time. And the agencies that were doing work, if they are going to be starved of funds, it's a very pathetic situation we are looking at. Particularly, as I keep saying, this is the children of India who are the most vulnerable, who are the most voiceless, and they are going to be the hardest hit. So you've raised a very important point when you talk about NGOs being starved of fund as a result, maybe starved of fund as a result of this money which would have gone to them being sucked out of the system. We need to look at it very seriously, this problem.
Yes. You know, India Spend had put out a estimate, and they put out this estimate by collating all of the announcements made by private sector, saying, you know, this company donates this much, this company donates this much. And their estimate was $1.27 billion back in May, on the 20th of May this year. They said the PM Cares Fund has received at least $1.27 billion. And that is a lot of money. And we would like to know where that money is going. Saket, we've pulled out those photographs that you were referring to of the person who heads SAK and Associates. I want to point out that this company has received the tender to audit both the PM Cares Fund and the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. Why are these photographs a problem for you, Saket? Explain to my audience.
Look, it's very simple. Mr. Agarwal was quoting the ICAI guidelines, the Chartered Accountants, the guidelines, the holy Bible that governs their working in India. There is a clause on ethics and independence, and it says that any auditor has to have plausible distance and deniability. Any auditor that is involved needs to be able to demonstrate that distance with their client. Now here, the owner of SARC and Associates, Mr. Gupta, he's not only photographed with different union ministers, he's written books on Make in India. He's been appearing on a lot of TV channels promoting the schemes of the Modi government. Now, as a rebuttal, there were a few offline, it's a standard BJP of responding. A few offline trolls commented and said, oh, there's a picture of him with former Delhi CM Sheila Dikshit ji as well. But the differences are under the UPA government, this man and his company were not auditing anything. There was no client-auditor relationship between SARC Associates and the previous government. Here, they have removed an auditor which has been auditing PMNRF for at least 3 decades. And they've appointed this firm. And then they've appointed the same firm for PM Cares. Now, the question is how independent, how many auditors working currently for the government of India, any ministry, how many of them have access to the Prime Minister? How many of their books get released by union ministers? So that distance is too close for comfort.
Yes. All right. We've run out of time and I've overshot the time that I've taken with my panelists. So I thank you for really being here. I thank my audience as well. In the interest of transparency and the organization that I'm launching with my 3 teammates, we're a 4-member team, this media house of ours. In the interest of transparency, let me declare to you that we've made 19,000 rupees from donations from our audience members through the course of this conversation. This is public information and you can look at it in the chat window to see who's given us how much. Shout out to Prashant, Kanchandani and Satish Patil, Safi Mohammed, and Rahul Kumar. Special shout out to one individual, Sumit Kavatra, who gave us $100. I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. A portion of this money actually goes to YouTube, which is the platform. I think that's about 30%, and we get the rest of it. It will be used to pay salaries and buy equipment for my team and myself, Arun, Rengaswamy, Amita Balchandra, and Ira Jha, who work with me. That to the government of India is what transparency sounds like. All right, we're going to wrap this up here. We'll be back every evening at 8 o'clock having conversations that are important to us. Remember, these are not debates. We don't yell at each other. The idea is to give you as much information as we can so you can make up your own mind as a citizen. Please, this is what you should do. Read as much as you can about the Prime Minister's Cares Fund. It is your right to find out, and you must understand what is going on. Follow people like Shailesh, Gandhi, Saket, Gokhale, Neerja, Chowdhury, Rajiv, Mishra on social media. Figure out the work that they're doing, understand the work that they're doing, and as a citizen, ask questions. This is what we can do right now. As a journalist, I will ask questions as well. I wish you a very good night. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Faye.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you.